Happy Saturday. Welcome to the Marketing Madman. Nick Constantino here, and today we are talking all things NFL. The season's about to get started. Your fantasy rosters are probably set. Hopefully you bet some futures and had some fun things going down. But today we're going to approach it from a different angle. Before we get to how we're going to do this, I'm going to introduce my guest a little bit differently. I am going to read an AI transcription of an article about the digital legacy of this person, and then I'm going to let him respond and tell his version of the story. So, and a quote. The text discusses the inclusion of Brian Finneran in the Madden NFL All-25 team, despite his relatively modest NFL real stats. The choice is seen as a playful nod to the game's history, where Finneran's virtual avatar was an unstoppable force due to his exaggerated in-game abilities. The author argues that while Madden NFL has become a highly realistic simulator of football, it's the remaining elements of unpredictability and humor, like the overpowered Finneran, that keep the game entertaining and distinct from the actual NFL. Finn, what do you think about that, my man?
I think it's fair. Some of the language I would have changed. But when you talk about a relatively modest real-life NFL career, that's probably pretty true for 12 years, 260 catches or so, and a handful of touchdowns.
Until you go to the fact that you played 12 years, man.
Right.
People don't even get through 3 years and they act like they had a career.
I was fortunate enough to be part of what was and became, not only for the Falcons, but for the NFL, a marketing campaign with Michael Vick.
Yeah.
And when you have a game like Madden, which is uber popular anyway, because of the way they do it, and then you add Michael Vick in there, who becomes a superstar and changes kind of the way the game is looked at the quarterback position, and then everybody, not only in America, but anybody in the world that's playing EA Sports with Madden, wanted to be the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah.
So when they talk about, what were some of the other terms? Overpowered, Finneran.
His virtual avatar was an unstoppable force. That's my favorite.
That's a beautiful thing right there. So I went from about 6'5" to 6'7".
Amazing.
Real life to the game. My speed went from 4.6 to 4.5. Real life to the game. Jumping ability went from, I think it was like 90. I had some good. I was pretty athletic. I could jump a little bit, but it went from like 90 to 99 by the time they were done with that. So I reached my full potential in Madden and left the other stuff on the field for me
It's amazing. You know, the one thing I will say is in the NFL now, it's changed. But if you had a quarterback who could just run around the pocket and get open, it's pretty easy to get open as a wide receiver. So it wasn't like completely unrealistic. And every year they try to make changes to adapt for it. But Michael Vick was such an anomaly to football that in a video game, you understand why it happened.
Yeah, no doubt.
You just got to you get to bear all of the great stats. So that's an amazing thing. All right. So Finn, what we're trying to do today, I want to set up go back a little bit about your tenure in the NFL with the Falcons, because the NFL was a very different entity then than it is now. And then I want to go through some reasons of why the NFL has transformed into this marketing behemoth.
Stop hitting that. It goes through the mic.
Oh, yeah.
So when you hit that, it affects the mic.
And you can tell that Nick is excited about this conversation because he's slamming the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, just reset and I can edit this part out.
Okay, what the hell did I say? All right, so I got it. All right, so Finn, the goal here today is talk about the NFL and the marketing behemoth it is. Let's talk through some of your tenure and how much it's changed. And we're going to try to get up to now and why this has become the beast that it is.
Cool.
There's a lot of other sports out there. We can talk about the NHL, MLB, NBA. They all do their own thing. My brief understanding is what the NFL has done such a good job of is you watch the NFL. You watch baseball for your home team. You watch the NBA because of the superstars, but you watch the NFL to just watch the NFL.
No doubt.
I think that's the difference.
And you learn about the players. You learn about them in college, and then you watch them go to their team, the 7-round draft. So they're going to draft 4 or 5 guys you may be aware of based off of what college you watched and the needs of the football team, and then you watch them grow into real football players after their rookie season, second year. And it's one of the few sports, in my opinion, unless you're a diehard in the other sports, that you start to know guys on other teams. You have to know every player, but you know every quarterback. You're familiar with the head coaches of those teams, the star receiver
Every time, yep.
The star running back, the defensive end that goes and kills guys. Jesse Bates comes to Atlanta, becomes one of the best in the league here. So you have different storylines and different positions where it's not just about the city like you talk about with baseball, where you just watch your team play every night. You watch. When Sundays come around and Monday nights, you're really not going to miss very much.
Straight through the day. Yeah, and I think it's a good way to lay it out. So let's go back a little bit and let's talk about your NFL career, when you were drafted, and what the team was like when you set up. Let's just lay it down. In the year you were drafted, what was the NFL like? What were you seeing when you were there? How excited were you to play?
So I came out of Villanova in 1998 as an undrafted free agent. I was a draft hopeful. So my agent and I talked about it and we thought maybe 6th, maybe 7th round draft pick, but that was going to be a reach. So we ended up, draft is over. We don't get any phone calls. And then right after the draft, my agent got calls from about 10 or 13 different teams. And now, as an undrafted free agent, we have a decision to make on what teams we want to look at and what team we want to go to. So we took all those calls and looked at the rosters, looked at who they drafted, and made a decision to go. It came down to the Eagles, like Baltimore and Seattle and Seahawks.
And Baltimore was a relatively new team then.
Yeah, it was 98. So it was Jim Harbaugh was like a veteran quarterback that came over late, and he and I had worked out together before the draft. And when I picked Seattle, he called me and said, if you ever have a quarterback in your pocket, like a guy you know, like you and I working out, go to that team because it gives you a better chance to make it. It's like, damn it.
That's good advice.
So I went to Seattle, and needless to say, I didn't make the team. It was close, but I didn't make the squad, so I sat out the whole 98 season. What was it like? It was old. It felt older. We had AstroTurf still down on the grass, the old school AstroTurf, like carpet in your mom and dad's house. Hard as concrete, brutal to play on. Wore tennis shoes out there, and tried to do it. It was the old school Seattle uniforms back then before they made the switch. Inside the Kingdom or Silverdome, whatever the hell they called it out there. When I went to Europe after that, played for the Barcelona Dragons, and then I came back and signed with the Eagles, and was on their team for 5 weeks, a cup of coffee. Had a bad drop in one of my first couple games, probably the second game. And they cut me, sat out 8 weeks, and then I finally landed on the Falcons practice squad in December of 1999, and then I made it the roster the next 11 years. So that's where I made my hay and was able to do some different things. So what changed? I don't know. I think fantasy football became a huge part of what it was. I didn't even know people were playing it back then when I started playing.
It was rudimentary at best, but people were doing it.
I remember people coming up. It was like 3 or 4 years in my career. Got you my fantasy team. I was like, all right, good luck with that, dude.
Yeah.
Because we got Michael Vick throwing me passes. I'll catch 50 balls a year and score 3 or 4 touchdowns. I don't know if that'll help your team or not, but it's cool. So it just started growing. And I think the biggest thing was I was always kind of a company man. So I enjoyed the rules. I enjoyed the regulations. I didn't have a problem that our socks had to be a certain height or our shoes had to be a certain color or you couldn't do things with your uniform. It just makes it so clean and precise and consistent through the whole league. You understand what you're getting, and the product is so good.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point because this is when the NBA was going crazy. The outfits that they were wearing, the NBA had gone nuts at this point, and the things that they were wearing. And I understand. Look, this is not a racial conversation or a lifestyle conversation, but I understand the value of keeping things unified. Right? Like I send my daughter to private school. I hate it. My wife makes me, but the fact that she's in a uniform every day means these kids can't make fun of each other for
100%.
Wearing different things, and it makes. And I understand how the perception can be. Well, it makes it just black and white, but in a sport, you have to attribute some of the success of the team to how many company men there were and how quickly the non-company men are out of the league.
Yeah, it's interesting, depending on what you do and how you do it. You can do that to yourself pretty quickly. And I'm not against, they call it NFL, no fun league, or not for long, or whatever you want to call it, but it's lasted a long time and become better and better because of the rules and regulations and stipulations, and they've loosened the reins a little bit. You can celebrate a little more. You can have some fun, and they've enabled you to express yourself in a certain way. And then, just because you can't do it on the football field in a game doesn't preclude you from doing it off the field.
Yeah.
With different NIL deals in college, and I'll build that up into what you're doing. And I had an AirTrend marketing deal, which was fantastic. I had billboards around town.
Super cool.
That were so sweet to see yourself. You drive downtown, it's like, there's your dad, kids. Okay, let's go get on AirTrend. What
a Delta thing about AirTrend sponsoring the hometown kid.
It was interesting. There was about 6 or 7 of us on the AirTrend deal. Yeah. And listen, I live and die for Delta now. Trust me, I always have. But when you get free flights back and forth to L.A.
They might be 6 hours late, but you're on free flights.
That's not fair. We had a good run.
You're not endorsing them anymore. You can have a real conversation. Right. So let me ask, one of the things, you're right, and I love it that the game outside of football has gotten so big that these guys' personalities come outside of it. The Manning brothers are obviously the easiest, best example. As a diehard Giants fan, I always, just the thought of Eli Manning was bigger than what the player was, and he's done such a good job of living into this persona that they actually get different on on-field and off-field personas. So I think that's definitely what's changed. But just talk about when you were playing, what was the marketing like? Were you constantly around these big marketing deals? Because it's got to have just sped up so quickly.
Yeah, I did. Like I couldn't get one of my first big kind of on-field deals is my Nike contract, and they try to find players that are, number one, pretty good football players, and then doing the right things and count on showing up for different things. So like when Matt Ryan signs his deal in 2008, or when Roddy White comes in, Roddy signed with Reebok, who had a connection with TaylorMade at the time. So we got like $200,000 a year to spend in merchandise.
Awesome. With
both those companies. Matt Ryan, very similar with Nike. A few years later, got absorbent amount of money to spend with the different teams. So as far as the NFL stuff, they had to have a licensing deal with the league.
Yep.
And then you got it on the field or off the field or whatever it might have been. So for me, I watched a lot of big name guys on my teams, the Jamal Andersons of the world, the running back when I first got here, Michael Vick for sure, Keith Brooking. You watch those guys. I think Patrick Kearney, one of our defensive linemen, got one of the very first shoe deals from Under Armour.
Wow.
When they were coming in the shoe market.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, he went through 4 or 5 different pairs of shoes because they couldn't get it right. Couldn't get it right. Couldn't find one that fit his. And I don't even know if it worked out because it was such a shitty shoe that they were just like, I can't have you pay me $200,000 and break my freaking foot or have an uncomfortable feeling.
And they were brand new out of Baltimore. It started as a lacrosse company. I mean, so Under Armour, that was one. Yeah, I think it's great. And I think we're going to keep this conversation going because there's a couple of very specific questions I have. But you've been listening to Mark and Man on Extra 106.3. We're talking NFL with Brian Finneran, and we'll be right back.